maple
I
blend
can't
estates,
believe you
I
cut
thought
it
I
down.
had finally discovered a
this
sanctuary
mess.
from
How
the
could you be
relentless
so
chaos of city
reckless?
life. Tree-lined streets, matching mailboxes, neighbors waving as they drove by, kids riding bikes until the sun dipped below the horizon, it all felt like stepping into a storybook world. After years surrounded by concrete, noise, and the constant hum of traffic, this neighborhood promised peace. The houses were meticulously maintained, each lawn immaculately trimmed, the air filled with faint hints of pine and freshly cut grass. It was the kind of calm that could almost lull you into forgetting the world outside. Yet I learned quickly that in neighborhoods where everything seems perfect, appearances often conceal a silent tension, an undercurrent of control waiting to surface. Standing in my backyard that stormy evening, rain soaking my hair, flashlight in hand, staring at the massive stump of the century-old oak that had once been the anchor of my yard, I realized peace was fragile. Madison Crowe, the HOA president, stood across the yard under a floral umbrella, soaked yet pristine, fury etched across her face. Every branch that once whispered comfort now seemed like a memory of the battle I had just survived. Before the conflict erupted, life here had a rhythm that felt almost sacred. I'm a landscape architect, and for me, every tree, every blade of grass, is part of a larger story. That oak in my backyard wasn't just a tree, it was history rooted in clay, a silent witness to decades of life. It shaded the playground next door, steadied the hillside through violent rains, and had endured storms that would have shattered younger trees like twigs. My mornings were spent sipping coffee under its branches, sketching garden designs, listening to the leaves rustle in the breeze, the sound like old friends speaking in whispers. The neighborhood itself exuded calm, children playing, distant laughter, the occasional dog bark echoing softly. But this calm hid an obsessive watchfulness embodied in Madison Crowe, early 50s, gray-blonde bob, pastel blazer that seemed to glow in the sunlight, clutching a clipboard as if it were her weapon of authority. She believed rules were scripture and property values were sacred, and she made sure the illusion of perfection was maintained at all costs. One ordinary Tuesday morning shattered that peace. A bright yellow sheet of paper was taped to my front door, the font Comic Sans, of all things an aesthetic crime in itself. Bold letters announced, notice of violation, unapproved vegetation structure obstructing uniform sightline. I laughed at first, incredulous. Unapproved vegetation structure? That was their polite term for my century-old oak tree, the very soul of my yard. My mind reeled, trying to process the absurdity. Surely, this had to be a clerical error, a misfiled notice, some bureaucratic mix-up. But when I called the HOA office, the answer was chillingly simple: the president's decision stands. No explanation. No room for discussion. Just authority imposed like a hammer, and suddenly my safe, quiet world felt threatened. I found Madison tending her roses across the street, hose in hand, sunglasses like armor shielding her from any dissent. Her smile was the kind that whispered, "I'm right, and you're already losing," and it hit me in that moment that this wasn't about a tree or aesthetics. This was about control. She needed the world to fit her vision, and anyone who dared deviate would face consequences. As I waved the notice, explaining calmly, she gestured toward her two-story stucco home like a general claiming victory over territory. Her pastel blazer glimmered in the sunlight despite the tension, her posture rigid, her expression implacable. 7 days to rectify the issue, 7 days to make a century-old oak fit her arbitrary sense of symmetry. The cold finality of her words struck like a physical blow: the president's decision stands. That moment crystallized everything: Madison's obsession, the stakes, and the knowledge that I was about to face a relentless, escalating storm. I dove into research, pulling property records, lot surveys, even county environmental regulations. The discovery made me smile. My oak was protected, grandfathered in long before the HOA existed. The irony was sharp, but Madison wasn't done. She watched, always watching. Blinds would twitch when I stepped outside, her shadow moved past my yard with a flashlight and clipboard, feigning inspection. The petty absurdity of it was almost laughable, yet beneath it simmered a dangerous seriousness. People like Madison don't accept refusal, they escalate. And she had a weapon I hadn't anticipated: social media. That night, my backyard appeared on the HOA Facebook page, captioned with venom, "Unsightly overgrowth threatening property values." Comments piled in, people criticizing the tree without ever setting foot in my yard. It was harassment cloaked as civic concern, a digital storm that mirrored the real one I was about to face. Then came the morning the chainsaws arrived. Two men in bright orange vests, ropes in hand, positioned themselves near the giant oak, buzzing saws like predators circling their prey. Madison, soaked but resolute in her pastel blazer, clipboard raised, barked orders as if conducting a battlefield operation. I grabbed my phone and hit record, heart racing, every vibration of the saws echoing my panic. Branches crashed, bark splintered, and the sound of destruction filled the air. It wasn't just a tree being cut down, it was my peace, my history, and my patience being tested in real time. Each moment dragged longer than the last, suspense and disbelief colliding in the rain-soaked backyard. Time slowed, almost theatrically, as the oak groaned, split, and began sliding toward the unsuspecting sheriff's cruiser. Rain poured harder, turning mud into a slick hazard, and shards of glass exploded in sharp, chaotic arcs as metal twisted beneath the trunk's weight. Madison's face was frozen, a mixture of horror, disbelief, and futile command, while I stood recording everything, calm but intense, heart-pounding. This wasn't just an act of nature, it was poetic justice, the culmination of months of obsessive control meeting the unyielding force of truth and gravity. Every observer would later describe this moment as cinematic chaos, but in that instant, it was personal, a vindication rendered in wood, mud, and rain. By dawn, the aftermath was undeniable. Mud and water had transformed the yard into a churning, chaotic scene. Sheriff Bradley Cooper arrived first, cautious and skeptical, while County Officer Mark Dawson followed, clipboard in hand, documenting every detail. Madison hovered, her composure unraveling as she realized the scope of the damage. Her pastel blazer no longer gleamed, her rigid posture now conveyed panic. I calmly presented the evidence, every photograph, video, and document aligned to show the truth. The weight of responsibility shifted visibly, as professionals recognized her intentional misconduct and the consequences of her unrelenting control. Nature had spoken, and the law was listening. Weeks later, a new oak sapling took root where the century-old giant had stood. I knelt beside it, watering carefully, feeling a wave of quiet triumph wash over me. Neighbors smiled, offering lemonade, children ran through the yards, laughter echoing like music I hadn't heard in months. Across the street, Madison observed silently from her car, her gray hoodie and jeans a stark contrast to her former flamboyant authority. This young tree represented renewal, resilience, and the subtle triumph of patience and integrity over arrogance. It wasn't just a plant, it was a symbol that the community could grow from what had been broken, that life and justice could start anew. Life in Maple Glen Estates gradually returned to its natural rhythm. Children played basketball, laughter rang through the streets, and wind chimes swayed gently in the warm breeze. I stood beside the new oak, calm, content, watching neighbors reconnect, a neighborhood restored not by punishment alone but by the slow, patient reclaiming of harmony. Madison, subdued, walked away from her old home, giving a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of lessons learned the hard way. The community had healed. Peace was no longer fragile, it was nurtured, visible in every smiling face, every playful child, and every vibrant leaf on the young oak that now anchored the yard. The envelope arrived one quiet morning. Plain, unassuming, yet carrying the full weight of consequences. Inside was the county's acknowledgement of Madison's unauthorized actions, detailing fines, restitution, and affirming that my oak had always been protected. I read it slowly, savoring the satisfaction of quiet vindication, the calm relief that comes from knowing that patience and careful documentation have power. The letter confirmed what I had long suspected: integrity and persistence, when coupled with truth, always outlast arrogance and control. Finally, I shared a photograph of the young oak on the community page. Comments, likes, and stories poured in as neighbors engaged and connected, rekindling bonds that had frayed under Madison's rigid control. Children played in the background, sunlight glinting off the new leaves, casting a warm glow over the scene. This moment captured the essence of resilience, growth, and the enduring power of standing firm. The lesson was clear: when someone tries to cut you down, patience, truth, and persistence allow your roots, your values, to stand strong, weathering any storm. Growth always finds a way, just as the young oak had reclaimed its place in the heart of the community.